these ruling events out there. We might call them the controllers rather than the watchers, but what's your description of the watchers? Who are they and what are they watching and who?
Well, it's sort of it's a play on words here because we're looking at the watchers from the Book of Enoch, and they're the Holy One, the watchers. In other words, these were the angels, and sometimes they were good, sometimes they were bad, depending on which portion you're reading. But we're also watchers here on Earth. Like right now, I consider myself a watchman. I'm always looking at breaking news, what's going on, the global political climate, which obviously is through the roof right now with what's going on in Libya. And then we look at the volcanoes, the earthquakes, the tsunamis, the fish and bird die-offs, and all the other craziness, the volcanic activity that we see happening. And it's just, to me, it's extremely alarming. So I watch this, and so it's really a play on words. I consider myself a modern-day watchman, specifically in regard to ancient prophetic texts and how they are, I believe, actually manifesting on the planet. Mm-hmm. So the times are absolutely unprecedented and extremely fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it, Lynn, isn't it? I mean, the world events we're seeing now, the natural disasters, the uprisings in the Middle East, the wars in the war zones, the war that's just starting in Libya, the succession of seismic events we've had over the past few years, it's all connected to one event, don't you feel?
Well, I think it's, we've talked about this before, but I truly believe we are looking at the acceleration of what is known in prophetic circles or prophetic parlance as the birth pangs. And this is what we see, and those are there's a lot of specificity to those birth pangs: wars, rumors of wars, famines and pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, and troublesome times. And, before 2010, I would say it was business as usual. Last year, it began. And other watchers, people that look at prophetic pulses, whatever, would say the same thing. I was recently on a program with 3 other researchers, all of us. There's no collusion between us. We were all asked the same question: are we in the birth pangs? In other words, this when a woman gives labor, those birth pangs happen quicker and quicker and quicker until she gives birth to something, and that's what I think we are. Those other 3 watchmen that were on this program concurred that, yes, this is the beginnings of the birth pangs, and that was the beginning of 2011. So I think we're in this thing for a while, and what we see is an acceleration of world events. It's happening so quickly in the aftermath. When people don't get it, it's like, okay, we got the Australian floods, got it. But they're still cleaning up from that. It hasn't stopped. There's 1 million people living in tents in Haiti. Now the cholera outbreak is threatening there. The Gulf oil spill. Where did all that oil go and the Cortex go? I mean, we're still reaping, but see, we forget about that. Oh, that was last summer, no problem. No. Talk to the people on the Gulf. Talk to the people who are making their livelihoods from the fishing industry. Go to Christchurch that had a 7.8 earthquake or what, 8.2 earthquake a few weeks ago. They're still cleaning up. And of course, we look at the tsunami, the earthquake, a 9.1 earthquake. There's those numbers again. 9.0, 9.1 earthquake in Japan, followed by the tsunami. That cleanup, and then it's compounded by the nuclear reactor, possible meltdown, Chernobyl-like scenario. We're looking at, it's off the hook. I've never seen it like this. I mean, I could go on. There's like 4 major calderas on the planet right now. Yellowstone is certainly one. The Barabunga, which is the sister volcano to the Eyjafjallajökull in Iceland. These are super volcanoes. The calderas are like 40 miles, 35 miles wide. These things are huge. If this thing blows, it makes Mount St. Helens look like a picnic. It could turn, let's say Yellowstone. If Yellowstone or the Barabunga, there's one in Africa, there's one in South America. Any one of these things blows, it's like 100 times what we see from the Eyjafjallajökull. And you're looking at perhaps a nuclear winter-like scenario for maybe 2 years. This has happened before. I mean, we've had when a volcano, a super volcano, has gone off like this. It's created an enormous ash cloud, and that impacts the crops and the growing cycle. What most people don't get is the crops and the growing cycle has already been greatly impacted in the last 2 years, and what we're seeing now is the rising food prices. Let me close this segment by saying this. The riots in the Middle East were sparked, in part, by rising food prices. People couldn't feed their family anymore. And that's what we're seeing. And so it's coming here. Make no, United States, make no, have no doubts about it. It is coming here, and that's why I keep telling people, stockpile food, emergency rations, canned food, whatever. Start stockpiling food and water.
Lynn, does the spiritual guidebook allude to anything that may be construed as what some called, and I think the actual word quickening was maybe coined by Art Bell years ago.
Yeah.
But is there a quickening is the quickening the same as an escalation of events, and is it in the spiritual guidebook?
Well, the guidebook of the supernatural doesn't. It tells us there'll be birth pangs. It doesn't say, these things are going to accelerate. I use the word accelerate rather than quicken, but it's basically the same thing. There is a quickening. There is an acceleration of events. The guidebook of the supernatural calls it the birth pangs, and that's what I would stick with. And so birth pangs happen quicker and quicker and quicker. So a quickening and acceleration is certainly an apropos word to use for what we're seeing on a global scale. And, we didn't even touch the financial markets, which are in total upheaval, complete upheaval. The Japanese just got hit with this unbelievable, devastating earthquake, and now the Chernobyl-like after effects from the tsunami. What most people don't understand is that the Japanese are bankrupt, literally. They just print more and more funny money. They already are in debt, so much debt that it's 200% of their gross national product.
Well, okay. Well, let me ask you. Tonight, as Andy full well knows, is the night of the supermoon. Is that? Should we expect to see any kind of a celestial event or a terrestrial event as a result of that supermoon?
Well, there are geologists who have looked at this and said it is going to influence the tides, and all these will bear pressure on the Earth on some level. I never, I don't prophesy things. I don't say, this is going to happen today. It's a type of a situation where, okay, supermoon, this is sort of interesting. Let's see what happens. Hopefully nothing will happen. I would rather have nothing happen. But apparently, the moon this closer or this close to Earth, it happens every 8 years. It's nothing that's completely anomalous. However, with all the recent earthquakes, specifically around the Ring of Fire, could this in fact trigger something? We don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. I would err to the side of probably nothing will happen. Let's hope so, but one never knows.
Well, Lynn, that fault line, the Ring of Fire, must now be severely weakened. So for any other abnormality to happen, like an extra pull on the Earth's gravitational field, I wonder if that weakness would actually just send it over the edge.
Well, if people keep talking about California, Oregon, the West Coast, and I had like a very, very vivid dream, and I've gone public with this. Hey, honey, can you bring me a glass of water, a bottle of water? Live radio, gotta love it. But I'm parched here. We just got in. I'm sorry I'm late, by the way. But I had an extremely vivid dream about 6 months ago, and I blogged about it and went public with it. And in that dream, I know the beach house it was. I was there years and years and years ago, but I'm pretty sure it was the same beach house because I remember walking down the road to get to it. It's a very isolated beach house on a point in Malibu. Fairly close to where I live. I'm up in the hills. This is right on the sand. But it's on sort of a rocky bluff, so it's up. It's not on the sand. It's sort of elevated, maybe 20, 30 feet above high tide levels. And in this dream, which is extremely vivid, I've only had two of these, and one was, I know it makes great radio, and I'm not making this stuff up. One was the Gulf oil spill, where same thing, I'm standing on a concrete platform someplace, I have no idea where this is, looking out of the ocean, and the ocean's on fire. I mean, these flames are shooting out of the ocean. I'm going, what am I looking at? I had never seen anything like it before. And so I woke up, I've got three witnesses to this. My wife, I told her, she had no idea what I was looking at. I called two friends of mine and said, this is the dream I had. And, they didn't know. And then 2 weeks later, literally 2 weeks later on the news, there's the Gulf oil spill with the rig on fire, on flame. I just went, oh my gosh, there it is. And this one has not happened yet, but I believe it was California. I believe I know the beach house, and I walked in to the first floor. There were oriental rugs everywhere, well furnished, and I'm standing in about 3 inches of water. And, the water's sloshing around, and it's, my shoes are wet, and I look down at the patterns of the rug, and of course they're popping out because they're all wet. And there's a fairly large burly man standing to the right side, and I call to him, and I say, how bad is it? And he says, it's above the rafters on the first floor. And I go, wow, and he motions me over to the window. We open up these blinds, and the Pacific Ocean is raging. I mean raging. It's just nuts, and that was the end of the dream. So, whether that's prophetic or not, we'll wait and see. Some people say, well, the tsunami in Japan, but no, it's not it. It's not it. This is, I believe, was right here in California.
Lynn, we have a question in the live chat. It says, what credence, or do you have any? Would you lend any credence to the Kami Elohim passing at the time of this great catastrophe? And do you know what that is, Kami Elohim?
Yeah. This has been hitting the on the internet. In fact, I read a post on it either today or yesterday. Again, all these celestial objects running around and doing things. When Halley's Comet passed over thousands of years ago, or when they, people freak out when they saw it. It's like, oh my gosh, the end of the world. And some of these things do. The larger bodies will certainly affect the tides, but to what degree? A very minuscule amount. So, what's interesting is that, again, the guidebook of the supernatural will tell us there'll be signs in the heavens and in the earth. I think we're seeing them in the earth. We're starting to see some in the heavens. The sun came up, for instance, 2 days earlier in Greenland a few months back. And that's not supposed to happen. And people talked about that for about 5 minutes, and then the story got buried. You don't hear anything about it. And the excuse was, well, maybe the global warming melted the glaciers, so the land mass is lower. What? Excuse me? Hello?
Yeah. Well, Lynn, I'm playing that trailer intro to your movie, and what the folks aren't hearing because we're talking, and maybe we'll play it after with the audio. But in it, it has a newscaster saying that the true north is off now, and you also point out that the moon, it looks like it's shifted. I mean, is there anything happening there?
Well, we have we're actually still trying to vet that. We have one Italian scientist. Well, let me back up. Richard, the co-producer of the Watchers, we're working on Watchers too, which is called Signs in the Heavens and Earth.
Yeah, that's what I'm playing.
What's interesting is he was the one that called my attention to the moon. He's going, my gosh, the moon looks just crazy. And sure enough, we've been able to amass pictures, and the moon looks like it's rotated. Well, here's the deal. Griffith Observatory, Pepperdine University, UCLA University, and the Jet Propulsion Lab would not speak to us. Would not speak to us, would not address the issue, just dodged it completely, okay? And that's the stuff of conspiracy theories. But we tried. We just have a question. Is something wrong with the moon? Well, one thing led to another, and what we did find was an Italian scientist who we quote, who wrote a paper that was published on the Cornell University's website, basically talking about the eccentricity of the moon, of a lunar surface. Something is going on. And we are in contact with him. We are exchanging emails. He's in Italy. But we're exchanging emails and trying to get to the bottom. Something's up. I mean, the guys wrote a paper on it. He's a scientist. Apparently the lunar surface is doing something which is sort of anomalous. We're not sure what. So, all these things begin to add up, and it's like, if you took one of these items that we've been talking about in the last 10, 15 minutes, okay, it's an earthquake. We've had them before. We can get through this. But when we start stacking up all these events, since just 2010, is it business as usual or something more? And, of course, I believe it's something more.
Andy, do they? Is there any talk in the newspapers in England about these anomalies in space?
Not that I've seen. And certainly not on the mainstream news.
But you also, and Lynn didn't hear this, but you were also saying earlier that they barely mentioned what's going on in Libya. Is that what you said?
No. The Libyan crisis has overshadowed what's going on in Japan and the nuclear power stations.
Yeah. Okay. So they're more concerned with what's happening in Libya rather than the tsunami that hit Japan.
Yeah. At this time. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the headlines with apparently we shot 120 missiles into Libya today. So here we go. We'll see what happens with all this.
Well, Lynn, are we going to see the United States get wrapped up in a third Muslim war?
Well, let me take a slurp here of agua. Make no mistake about it. When Americans, the pundits stand up on in the news shows and say, the people in Egypt and Tunisia and the Arab world want democracy. Americans, when the pundits stand up on in the news shows and say, the people in Egypt and Tunisia and the Arab world want democracy and blah, blah, blah. What will happen is the Muslim Brotherhood will eventually take over, and what we will see is some sort of a Sharia law, loose caliphate put together in the Islamic world. There is no springboard to democracy like we have here in the West. It just doesn't exist. There was no first of all, there was no Catholic Church where the Protestant Reformation could reform that. And then second of all, from the Protestant Reformation, people began to think, and you get the guys like John Knox and others, who penned, law is king, not king is law, which was, huge back then.
Mm-hmm.
And what law are we talking about? And of course, from that stemmed the basis of this country, which was, you can argue all you want about, well, it's a Christian nation, it's not a Christian nation. The bottom line is it was informed by, men who knew, the Judeo-Christian Bible and work from there. And what they penned was this, that all men are created equal and have certain inalienable rights from their Creator. Now that directly, like it or not, stems from a Judeo-Christian worldview, period. I mean, there's no way to fudge that. Well, they don't have anything like that in the Islamic world. There's no springboard. All men are not equal. The infidel, you can lie to the infidel. And on it goes, which is why we have freedom of religion in this country. Of course, some of those freedoms can be used actually against us, but I little rabbit trail here. But the bottom line is there's no springboard to get to a democracy or to a republic from Islam. What they have is Sharia law. There's never been any reformation in Islam. There's just a strict adherence to Sharia law, and that's what they fall back on. And a great graphic picture of this is in Tahrir Square in Egypt, when this is before Mubarak stepped down. Well, when the imam got on the loudspeaker and called everybody to prayer, guess what? The protesters and the military stop what they're doing, and everybody starts down the Mecca. That speaks volumes. The picture speaks, thousands of words. What's more alarming is several weeks later, back in Tahrir Square, when a imam who had been outlawed to speak publicly by Mubarak and Mubarak's regime for decades, literally, addresses about 1.5 million people gathered in Tahrir Square. And they're all chanting, "To Jerusalem we go, martyrs in the millions. To Jerusalem we go, martyrs in the millions." And of course, again, the Guidebook of the Supernatural talks about all of this, all these prophecies in the last days, and how a group of nations will come up against a land of unwalled villages, which is basically Israel, after they've been regathered from the four corners of the earth, which is exactly what we see in Ezekiel 37. That's happened, 1947. So, 1948, here we are. And it's all these things are beginning to pass. So I look at the Middle East and I am extremely alarmed. Who would have ever imagined 6 months ago that we'd be looking at the type of rebellion and anarchy in some places in these countries. And of course, Yemen, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia has not tipped yet. Iraq is just a puppet right now. The United States is the only thing that's propping it up. And again, I would like to think, although I don't believe this for a minute, but if I wasn't such a conspiratologist, I would actually think that the United States think tanks got together and said, the next, extrapolating, let's say 20, 30 years in the future, and knowing the instability of the Middle East, knowing radical Islam and what it could be, they would say, we need a base of operations right in the heart of the Middle East. Boom, let's go into Iraq. That's one way of looking at it. There's another way of going, this whole thing is manipulated. The ancient city of Babylon is there. There's something else going on. And I think I've talked about this on your show, the King of Jordan, the Luciferian dialectic, Babylon, this whole thing. So, I mean, if we can touch on that if you want to, but I'll wrap it up by saying this. I am extremely alarmed at what I see. Remember, we keep isolating these things. War in the Middle East. Well, that's affecting the global economy with the oil and the oil shortages. If the Straits of Hormuz and the Gates of Tears are closed, oil right now is hovering about, 105 or over $100 a barrel. We could easily watch this thing shoot up if there's a major conflict to over $200 a barrel. Easily.
Andy, how much do you guys pay for gas in the UK in dollars?
In dollars, I can't equate to dollars, but it's touching now nearly £2.70 a gallon, which probably I don't know the exchange rate, but it's quite not £2.70 a gallon, sorry, £2.70 a litre, which is far less than a gallon, of course. Wow. So I don't know the exchange rate now.
It's about $8 or $9 a gallon.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
So how do you guys?
It's a lot of money, but I do have a vehicle that runs on liquid petroleum gas, which is far cheaper.
All right, you got a question there for Lynn? You go right ahead.
Yeah, Lynn. I mean, before you came on, Daniel and I were talking about bloodlines, the world elite, and I'm just wondering now, with the events in the Middle East, is there a Machiavellian hand behind everything, moving pieces as they would on a chessboard? Is there something we're missing here? Is there some overriding force that is controlling events?
Well, the short answer to that is yes. Of course, I believe that. There's been a Luciferian satanic conspiracy for thousands of years. We're told in the Guidebook of the Supernatural, i.e. the Bible, that in 2 Thessalonians, which is it was a city in the ancient world, basically that the mystery of lawlessness is working. Now, this was written 2,000 years ago, and the end game is to set the Antichrist in the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem to be worshipped as God. I mean, that's where all this, it sounds crazy, but that's where it's all headed. Absolutely, that's where it's all headed. And so some of these people that appear one way are in fact, look, there's a dark brotherhood which is working behind the scenes. It is extremely Machiavellian. I mean, that's what we're looking at. Just the fact that all of a sudden we're in Libya messing around with that. Now, okay, people talk about Obama being, dithering, not doing anything off in South America someplace. In my opinion, he's just a figurehead. We haven't had a president here since JFK was blown away for three reasons. He was trying to dismantle the CIA, that's documented, trying to dismantle the Federal Reserve, which has nothing to do with our federal government. Our monetary system was hijacked in 1917 on Jekyll Island by a cartel of international bankers. It has nothing to do with anything. He took us off the gold standard. That's the power behind the throne. And, of course, the third thing he was trying to do was get us out of Vietnam. Eisenhower warned us of a military-industrial complex. None of that's ever changed. We've spent, 10 years in Afghanistan? How many thousands of people have been killed? The opium harvest is over $1 trillion per year, and on it goes. It's war and rumors of wars. And it's just hysterical how, be proud, and all these people are still, so many Americans are gung-ho and country and flag and the military. And, I have friends in the military, and they're proud to be Marines and everything else. I get all that, and I think it's great on one level. On the other hand, the people that are controlling this thing, what are we doing in Afghanistan after, 9 or 10 years? What is going on there? What are we doing in Iraq? I mean, there is no victory. It's just endless war, endless war, endless war. It's insane.
So, Lynn, there must be something in that region that our leaders want. There must be something there that they're looking for, or there must be a base of power that they want to sit on.
And we're not getting the oil. So what is it? Is it ancient artifacts?
Well, it depends on who you talk to on that, isn't it? I mean, there are people that are saying in Iraq, stargates and portals and this and that. There's a couple of things, this global superpower. It's interesting that when we look again, if we look at the Middle East, and you would say, and going back to the time of Jimmy Carter when Khomeini took place, our intel, they know what's going on. And when we look at the map, Iran is hedged in literally by on two fronts by United States troops. On the eastern flank, it's Afghanistan. On the western flank, it's Iraq. And we've got hundreds of thousands of troops in both places. It's really interesting that this is how it's shaping up. Mm-hmm. Iran wants to set up a caliphate in the Middle East. There's no mistake about it. Which is why the United States sold the Saudi Arabians billions of dollars worth of arms, planes, tanks, everything else, because they know this animosity between Shia Muslims and Sunni Muslims has gone on literally for centuries. And the Shia, which has always been the minority, want the holy sites. They want the holy sites of Mecca and Medina. Something interesting, there was a Middle East map carved up by the Bush administration in 2007. Very, very interesting. And I talked about this when they invaded Iraq, that Iraq would be partitioned into 3 separate countries. And that's what this map has. I blogged on it and posted the map on my blog several weeks ago when I did it. But what's interesting is that the holy cities the Islamic holy cities of Mecca and Medina are not part of Saudi Arabia in this map. They are now partitioned off as a separate country, Islamic holy site country, ruled by who? Who knows? But, Iran's got its fingerprints all over this thing, and they are Shia, and they want control. And some of the uprising in these countries are being fueled by Iran and the Shia minorities who have been suppressed and repressed literally for hundreds and hundreds of years. Are tired of it. And so that's part of this ancient schism between Sunni Muslim and Shia Muslim is now spilling over. And, of course, I would like to think that the United States think tanks and our intel would be smart enough to figure this stuff out, but frankly, I don't think we are. So, going back to Andy's viewpoint with the whole Machiavellian scenario here, when we look at Afghanistan, what are we really doing there? Well, the opium harvest is $1 trillion a year. That's a lot of money. The opium harvest, say what you want, but the opium harvest is over $1 trillion a year. Where's the money going? Several months ago, there were some articles in Russian papers talking about there's a real problem now with heroin addicts because of all the opium coming into the country. And, where's all that opium coming from? It's coming from Afghanistan. So now Russia is getting addicted. And, we see this everywhere. It's just like our southern border still remains porous for, decades and decades. No one closed it. And so, now we see the drug violence and the wars going on across the border. Well, meantime, in the United States, there isn't a person that hasn't been to rehab. What I mean by that is every family in America has at least one person that's been to rehab. Go back 40 years ago, that didn't exist. You think we got a problem? Hello. This is what's Machiavellian. This is deliberate. Dumb down the people, keep them misinformed. Yes. And I'll give you just one example. It's like the Middle East is completely imploding, right? A week or two ago, before the tsunami hit. And who did they dangle up in front of the masses to look at? Who usurped the stories? Charlie Sheen. I blogged about it. He's sending the clowns. Here's the latest guy we can all look at and gasp and wonder. Let them eat cake. This is the Roman circus all over again. And it's to keep the masses dumbed down and stupid and looking at this ridiculous circus in front of us. And I feel sorry for Charlie Sheen, but he's just the pawn he's being used. And of course, his story usurped what was going on in the Middle East, and did so until the earthquake hit Japan and the tsunami, and then of course all eyes turned to that. Well, now we see planes going in Libya, and watch how they will guarantee it in the next 24 to 48 hours there'll be some useful idiot that they'll throw up for the masses to look at and distract them from what is really going on. Well, American Idol is another great example.
Lynn, let me ask you something, and this is going to segue off of Andy's question. And you mentioned briefly there about the theory of the Stargates. Of course, I've heard of Stargate theory, the ancient artifacts, maybe searching for the Holy Grail. And then let's bring in the aliens because they're involved with it too. There's an alien base somewhere in Iraq, and they're just meeting them. Maybe they're stealing the oil. Of course, we haven't seen it, but whatever. But are these sort of I don't know, aftermarket sort of conspiracy theories? Aren't they because people? And I know you must have pontificated on this, that people are making these theories up, as wild as they might seem, because the events don't make any sense. And one of those is, of course, as Andy suggested, well, then they don't seem to make mistakes, make sense, but perhaps behind the scenes somebody's moving the pieces, and we're only going to see the end result of it and see the sense that it does make. But so much of it, though, isn't it made up because we can't make sense of it, and isn't there a danger of thinking, well, these are just isolated events, and we're assigning meaning to meaningless events, and the government hanging on to their, to the tail of the events, trying to act like they have control and they know what's going on, but they really don't, so perhaps it doesn't mean anything. There's no end of the world going on here. There's no world takeover. There's nothing happening but just random events that will continue forever. I know you must have thought this out, but have you passed that and said this can't be that part?
Well, and I blogged about that actually a bit last week. Toynbee, the historian, talks about that history is just an endless repetition of cyclical events. Empires rise, they fall, and they're predictable, and that's very true. We all know that. Okay, so Toynbee's right on one level, except what we see is, even though empires rise and fall, there is an escalation. There is an advancement. It becomes more and more complex. The world is wired together. And if there is no supernatural, like with Sigmund Freud, didn't believe in anything that was supernatural. Of course, Jung did. And so the apocryphal story is Freud comes in and wants to see a demonstration. And Jung tells him, well, the book's going to fly out of the shelf. And right when he says that, the book flies out of the shelf. Yeah. Freud, apparently, according to the story, faints dead away. He's never seen anything like it before. That shouldn't have happened. It's supernatural. Jung was sort of, I would, probably too strong of a word to say he was an adept, but he certainly was in touch with supernatural forces. The question is, what supernatural forces was he involved with? And I don't think they were benevolent. But here's the deal: if there is no supernatural, and if prophecy doesn't exist, then fine. I'm all down with Toynbee. In other words, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Paul. We sat through it and was tortured for basically 90 minutes last night. It's one of the foulest movies I've ever had to sit through, but it's what I do and it's what I talk about, and I need to stay on top of and abreast of of what is happening on all levels as much as I possibly can. What's interesting is that this alien, there was a character in it who's a Christian, and she's, the typical, or she's portrayed very stereotypically. And then, of course, Paul, the alien, and when she sees him, she goes, "Oh my God, you're a demon," and she falls on her knees and begins to see amazing grace. I mean, how silly is that, right? And she begins to argue with this so-called alien. And by the way, it's a gray. And even though it's wisecracking and swears and curses and throws f-bombs all over the place and smokes cigarettes and marijuana, a very hip alien. When there are occasions when I just look at the drawing, and to me it's incredibly malevolent looking. Now that's just my take on it. But here's the deal. The alien saying there is no God, there is no right or wrong, no heaven or hell, no anything. We all just evolved. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've been taught since Darwinism. And if that's true, then history is meaningless. It's just survival of the fittest, and on it goes, forever and forever and forever. Okay, I get that. That's one worldview. That's not my worldview. The moment we plug in prophecy, which we see is extremely specific in regards to Israel, which we talked about a few minutes ago, Israel being regathered from the four corners of the earth, reestablishing its ancient homeland. That's just one prophecy. We start stacking all these prophecies up, and I'm not talking Nostradamus and Edgar Cayce and Blossom Goodchild and the Hopis and the Mayans. I address that in my upcoming book, hopefully, which will be out around June, called The Cosmic Chess Match. This prophecy is not 40% accurate or 60 or 80% accurate. It's 100% accurate 100% of the time. It never misses. And so that begs the question, where is it coming from, and can we trust the entity who's telling us this prophecy? And of course, in my opinion, we can, very much so. And what's interesting about this prophecy is telling us that it's not the end of the world. In fact, the History Channel last week called me up. They wanted me to be on this William Shatner thing, the strange and weird show, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And they kept wanting to say, well, isn't this the end of the world? And I said, no, it's not the end of the world. It's the end of this system. The system that the world has been ruled under. Andy talked about Machiavellian forces that are behind the scenes, and I believe that there is a Luciferic Machiavellian type hierarchy, which is pulling the strings behind this thing. It's very dark, very malevolent stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, this war that's been in the heavenlies, in another dimension, another supernatural realm, and I understand it sounds like science fiction, is about to it's actually spilling over into this dimension now. We're starting to see things manifest like never before, and we're going to see more of it as time goes on. So history, in my opinion, I differ with Toynbee. It is cyclical in the sense that, yes, we do see empires rise and fall, but at the same time, history is moving towards a climax, and that's where we're going. Mm-hmm. It's not the end of the world, it's the end of the present system that the world is being ruled under, and a new system is about to take its place.
I'm just wondering then, how we spoke about the Antichrist a bit, or you touched on the Antichrist a bit earlier on. Do our world leaders know about this? Are they trying to put this demonic architect into power? Have they got an agenda for this?
Well, it gets into some really weird stuff here, and we don't know, who are the real players, but certainly when you get Alex Jones stuff in Bohemian Grove and other people who have looked into that, and we see even Ahmadinejad talking for a new world order. We see in Europe talking a new world order. We see George Soros talking about the slow devaluation and collapse of the U.S. currency. I mean, what kind of a guy? To me, I mean, that's just how much more evil do you want to get? Talking about the slow dismantling of the American economy, the system that we know, the crashing of the dollar. It's all being orchestrated. I mean, it's just puppets. Some of these people that are, Obama, in my opinion, is just a figurehead. It doesn't matter who we have elected. He dithers, he stands down, he does nothing. And perhaps he's starting to see exactly what the office is about. Mm-hmm. Again, remember, they killed JFK, and they blew him away in Dallas because of what he was trying to do. And people who were in power did not want to give up that power, and it's the same thing now in 2011. Mm-hmm. We are escalating towards something, towards a one world order, a new world order, a one world government, a one world religious system. That's where it's going. What was interesting about the Paul movie, too, let me just go back to that because it ties in with this, is that Christians were perceived as backward, moronic, imbecilic, Cro-Magnon type people. And the character that they used for this was this girl's father, who yelled at her in a very gruff voice. He hadn't shaved in a week. He had a Bible in one hand and a double-barrel shotgun in the next, literally, okay? And that's what people, and of course the audience just lapped it up and laughed and poked fun and everything else. And the guy was really stupid and backwards and ignorant. And that's how Christians are portrayed. And what was promulgated, literally, was what I would term the alien gospel, which is that E.T. created all life on this planet. Everything just evolved. They genetically manipulated early man. They started the world's religions and started the world's civilizations. Now they're back at this critical juncture in human history to usher us into a time of peace, prosperity, and knowledge. And, I've said this for years now, our priority before the event. So when the event happens, when, it's not like the TV show, but when they actually begin to manifest, I've already said it. I've already called this out, that this is what's going to happen. This is what they will say. And this is what the movie Paul is promulgating. And people just lap it up. It's just amazing. And it's some of the language was so over the top. And look, I'm no prude here, guys, but do I really need to hear an F-bomb every 5 seconds? Can we write some other words? Are we that stupid, that ignorant and illiterate that it's just dreadful. Just dreadful.
Lynn,
after a while, you sit there and go, oh my gosh, I need a fire hose.
All right, we have this question for you from the Fast Blast from Kevin in Massachusetts. Lynn, what's your take on the radiation from Japan hitting the U.S. on the West Coast in particular? Lots of alternative radio hosts have been ramping up the fear. That kind of reminds me, you mentioned Alex Jones, the year 2000, that guy was making a ton of money scaring people thinking the world's going to end and they should buy all of his survival crap. He never did give them their money back because it never happened. He just went on to the next event, tried to capitalize. I imagine he's selling iodine right now. So is there going to be some radiation hitting America?
Well, we're getting a bit of a spike, but it's certainly not harmful right now. On the other hand, if we get a meltdown like Chernobyl, okay, it might be good to stock up on some pills. We already had that stuff. We've had it like for a year, well over a year, just anticipating that, it's going to hit the fan and do it now. I tell people constantly, stockpile food and water and, understand the times that we're living in. People don't want to hear that. And then you get all these other people that are fear mongers and, quick, go out and buy iodine tablets and all this stuff. And, the world's coming to an end. And, look, I try to balance stuff. I really do. But what I'm looking at is that we are in tenuous, tumultuous times. They are the birth pangs, and things are going to accelerate. It's not going to get better, in my opinion. It's going to get worse, unfortunately. And I wish I was wrong on this. I'm not selling food shortage, food stuffs or anything like that. I write books and we do DVDs to try to warn people, what's going on. But we're not capitalizing by selling, rations and all this other stuff. But we are trying to warn people that something is coming. Ancient biblical prophecies talk about the days. Look, let me just give you a couple of prophecies here, and I've said them before on your show, but, people listen to the stuff that's in one ear and out the other, and I haven't been on for a while, so here's the deal. This is exactly what these prophecies say, that even the elect would be deceived, if that were possible, that men would faint from fear from what is coming on the earth, that unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive, that the fallen angel, the fallen cherub, would come with all signs and lying wonders. You start putting that stuff together, folks, and that's not a happy little scenario here. So if those prophecies are true, and here again, when you see these things, what things begin to happen? Wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, and troublesome times. Look up, because basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, the king is coming back, the second coming. There's the war in the heavenlies. The book I'm working on, Daniel and Andy, is called The Cosmic Chess Match, and it talks about this heavenly war that's been waged for we don't know how many thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And we're told in the book of Revelation that Michael and the good angels fights with the fallen angel and all his cronies, and they are cast down from what I call the second heaven. And it says, woe to the inhabitants of earth. And get this, it uses 3 or 4 different names to describe what we call Satan. It says Satan, the fallen angel, the dragon, the accuser of the brethren, is cast to earth. And I'm going to paraphrase here. He's really ticked off because he knows his time is short. In other words, he's stuck in the time-space continuum. He no longer has access outside of time like he's had for millennia. Now he's stuck in the time-space continuum. He's really ticked off because he knows his time is short.
You know what? I'm glad that he's ticked off, and wherever he is, there's something video for him. Hey, question come in from Ohio. Lynn, what do you think? Could the disaster in Japan been caused by HAARP?
Well, we keep hearing that. We hear that HAARP caused Haiti. And there's no way to vet that, but I've watched that and read a bunch of different information on it. That the British fleet sailed out of those waters like 3 or 4 days before the earthquake struck Haiti, and that British fleet had been there, a continual presence since the 17th century. So that's an interesting story. Is there a way to vet that? Well, it'd be very difficult to vet that. But
can't HAARP cause something? I want HAARP to cause some disaster. I mean, a lot of people have been describing the effects of HAARP. I'm just, can he just kick the thing in and cause some problems? Is it possible?
Well, I think it is. I remember seeing a video with Nick Bajik on a while back talking about what HAARP can do. Now, HAARP certainly can create earthquakes. The question is, why would anyone want to create an earthquake in Japan? Here's something to consider. Here's something just to consider, okay? And again, this gets back into the supernatural. In 2009, in November or December, right somewhere in that, I haven't gone back and looked at it, on my blog, LAMarzulli.wordpress.com. I blog 6 days a week, not on Saturday, but the rest of the days I blog. And I felt something had shifted in the heavenlies. What that means is in my gut, I felt something's up. Something's happened. Something shifted. It's not the same. We're moving out of where we've been and into uncharted territory. And I blogged about it. I wrote about it. And that was November or December of 2009. Sure enough, 2010, things started to happen. Okay? And I wrote a blog about a story. We're told in prophecy that the man of sin, the Antichrist, in other words, the Luciferian agenda, will not be able to manifest until he that is restraining him is taken out of the way. He that restrains the mystery
who is that?
Of lawlessness.
Okay, who's doing that?
That's a $64,000 question. In other words, the mystery of lawlessness will continue to try to do its thing, but we know who's restraining him, and will restrain the mystery of lawlessness. Just think of lawlessness. Just what is lawlessness? Just think. Everything Paul was describing yesterday in that movie is lawlessness, okay? Till he is taken out of the way. So who is restraining? Some people believe it's the Spirit of a living God that's restraining, which is interesting. I don't believe it is. In my opinion, it's Michael. And he's in charge of the heavenly army because he fights the fallen angel. We know that he fights the fallen cherub, the fallen one, Satan, and casts him down, down to earth. What if? And this is just travel with me here for a second, and cast him down, down to earth. What if? And this is just travel with me here for a second. There are portals. We know that there are gateways. The Guidebook of the Supernatural gives us a very graphic example of what I believe is a gateway, a portal, when the angel appears to Daniel. He has got to go back and get reinforcements to get through to even talk to Daniel. It takes him 21 days Earth time to do that. Isn't that interesting? What if these portals and these gateways, and I address some of this in my upcoming book, what if Michael has ordered an orderly retreat? And in doing that, he's now allowed what he's been able to restrain. He no longer restrains as much as he once did. And now what we're seeing, this is some of this stuff that's going on globally, in my opinion, has the fingerprints of the fallen one all over it. And there are examples that we get in the Guidebook of the Supernatural. One of the oldest books called the Book of Job, where we see exactly this thing, where Job destroys, or the fallen rather, destroys Job's family by sending a violent great wind, a cyclone, a tornado, calling fire down from heaven, which wipes out, another part of Job's holdings, shall we say. It wouldn't surprise me at all if some of what we're seeing is not caused necessarily by HAARP, or, people go, oh, God must be bad at us. Okay, I get that. 1 billion aborted babies on the planet, that's a holocaust, but we won't go there. But what if Michael, the good guys, began an orderly retreat and allowed the fallen one to begin to do what he wants to do? And that's what I think we're seeing.
All right.
Food for thought.
Andy, you have a question for him?
Yeah, it's just there is a whole lot going off in the world, and I mean, I've been looking at the continuous seismic activity and the continuous uprisings now in the Middle East, and the wars we've had and the social unrest across the world. And I've often thought, well, there is something more sinister behind this. These are, although they all seem separate events, even the different earthquakes and the volcanoes seem like a separate event. But there's a nagging thing in the back of my mind, Lynn, that it's not a separate event. It's all one event. It's all leading up to one event. It's all connected.
Well, and Andy, I completely concur. It is all connected. That's the whole point. It's exactly what the guidebook tells us will happen in the latter days. It's all connected. It's all extremely deliberate. There are useful pawns on the face of the earth that are men and women that are willfully signed over to the dark side, shall we say, and there are others who are not assigned to the dark side and are trying to fight this. I myself consider myself one of those guys who are trying to fight it and warn people. But I agree, the strings are being pulled, absolutely, and it's headed towards this climax. That's where it's going. I agree completely.
This person that's holding things back. You say it's a person, or is it? Let's crank that down a little bit. Who's restraining what?
Well, there are. Let's say, for instance, let's just say that there are dark supernatural forces and good supernatural forces, and they have names, and they've been manifesting here for thousands and thousands of years, and they're about to manifest even more than what they have before. But this war in the heavenlies has been waged, and for territory, for certain geographical areas, anytime you've got human sacrifice over an area where blood is being spilled in a ritualistic way, you're opening up gateways and portals. And that's unfortunately what's happened on the planet with 1 billion abortions, which is nothing more than a ritualistic Luciferian satanic rite, because that's what it is. You're killing. What more innocent life can you possibly take than an unborn in a mother's womb? Give me a break. And I realize that's a hot button issue for people and they freak out, but they've never examined it from a supernatural perspective, and that's exactly what it is. It is in my opinion, it is a ritualistic, satanic, Luciferian blood sacrifice ritual. And so you've got this going on, and this is no different than what happened when the Mayans are sacrificing thousands and thousands of people and ripping their hearts out. It's all bloodletting, and it's all for the same thing. It creates power for the dark side to manifest. They can't manifest unless this kind of bloodletting is happening. And this is what 1 billion of them. Are you kidding me? And this is why we see what we're seeing.
Yeah.
The restrainer, Michael and his good angels, are now pulled back, in my opinion, and they are allowing the fallen one to manifest in greater ways. And some of this is because of the ritualistic bloodletting, which has happened on this planet.
Okay.
For decades.
All right. By the way, Andy's getting ready to leave. He needs to attend to some things. Andy?
Yeah, Lynn, it's been fantastic speaking to you again after all this time.
Andy, always good to hear your voice, man. Hang in there and get better, will you?
Yes, I'm getting better by the day, and unfortunately, Edges, I've got to sign off now because I do need to take some medication, unfortunately.
Right.
But it's been great to be back. It's good to be back into the swing of things. Don't forget to tune into EBN Reports, which is tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on the UK Studio Channel. I'll sign off now.
Right.
Goodbye, Daniel.
Right.
Goodbye, Lynn.
Take care, Andy. Good hearing your voice.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay. See you. Lynn, you were saying about this blood sacrifice, and my question is, would you go back to 9/11 and say that might have been a 3,000 person blood sacrifice?
Well, there are people that are looking at it that way. 9/11 to me is the classic. And I realize, there are some people that you even begin to broach the subject, and it's like they look at you like you're a crackpot. Okay, let's not. All I know is look at Building 7, and no plane hit Building 7, and it's made out of steel, and that thing falls at free fall speeds in less than 20 seconds, 8 hours later. Baloney.
Right.
That's not, we're looking at something.
Right.
And then so and I blog about this. I call it the Luciferian dialectic. A dialectic is conflict, counter-conflict synthesis. The conflict is 9/11. The counter-conflict is Afghanistan. Then we go into Iraq for some crazy reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
He got weapons of mass destruction. Well, where are they? Well, Saddam had them, but he gave them to the Syrians, and they're up in the Bekaa Valley. Mm-hmm. That's where they are. But why did we go into Iraq? Because Babylon's in Iraq. And the third layer of a dialectic might be all this is as Andy was talking about, extremely Machiavellian, extremely, and it sets up this whole one world government system. This is really interesting. The Iraqi dinar was, I think, 4-to-1 trade, four Iraqi dinars to $1 American dollar before the war happened in Iraq. Now it's like 3,500 to 1. Mm-hmm. So they devalued the dinar, and at some point it's going to revalue. Well, their version, they have their own Federal Reserve now, which was set up by, guess who? The same guys who control our money. Mm-hmm. And they created a counterfeit bill called the Iraqi dinar, which is about 3,500 to 1. When the dollar tanks and the Iraqi dinar revalues, just do the math. Mm-hmm.
Well, now, see, that kind of goes back to my earlier question, because, nobody likes to be known as a kook, or, a conspiracy theorist, as if everything is a theory and you're just, you have aluminum foil underneath your hat and you got an orgon blaster thing on your desk, but, so, you look for something definitive to point to say, look, I'm not crazy. I'm not making this up. But when you say Building 7, to me, that is the quintessential. Stop calling it's the trump card. It's the trump card of conspiracies to prove that there is something going on that somebody is lying to you about.
Right.
So therefore, maybe the next thing you have conjecture about isn't so crazy either. You see?
Well, there's two dynamics of the 9/11 events which mystify me. One is the Pentagon, and the other one is Building 7. The Pentagon, there is no plane that hit the Pentagon. All those cameras across the street were confiscated by the federal government, and, they've not let anybody examine those things.
Right.
The early shots before the facade fell, you see a round 16-foot diameter hole. Mm-hmm. That's all. There's no imprints of the wings. There's nothing. And the Duke University reenactment of that is just so much nonsense. They show the wings falling off on the exterior of the building and somehow disintegrating. Well, where are those engines? Mm-hmm. Hello? They're not there. And in every other plane crash I've ever seen, the engines are very, they don't melt. So we've been lied to, and it's just like the American people see Charlie Sheen, Lindsay Lohan, how's O.J. doing in jail, Lady Gaga comes out of an egg, and of course the staple American Idol. And on it goes. And people are dumbed down.
This Lady Gaga keeps popping up in the news. You said earlier some of an event's going to come up to distract us. Now this lesbian or homo, I can't tell what this person is. Is that a man or a woman?
Gaga?
Yeah, Gaga.
I think Gaga's all female. There was one picture I found on her, without the wigs and the makeup and everything, and that's the one I posted on the blog when I did a write-up on her. Mm-hmm. But I just went, this is what she looks like, and she's hollow, and there's nothing there. There's just a shell, and she's just an operative. I mean, Gaga became a household name, and it's how does that work and this is what people don't get. Fox News, Bill O'Reilly, baloney. Bill O'Reilly spends 15 minutes talking about Lady Gaga. Mm-hmm. Why would anybody in their right mind talk about Lady Gaga?
Yeah.
Why are we discussing her now?
Yeah, she is
because
lecturing.
All she is a frickin' useful idiot to draw people away. It's a useful distraction. That's all it is. And each one that they use, whether it's Britney or Lindsay or Charlie Sheen, becomes more outrageous than the last to keep people distracted. Meanwhile, the Middle East is imploding. There's food shortages, animal die-offs, earthquakes every, a 7.0 or greater on a weekly basis now. Volcanic activity is threatening. The dollar is ready to collapse. The world instability. The Muslim world is absolutely going through the roof.
Right.
And on and on and on. And what do they show us? How dare they? I mean, but, unless the American people wake up, and it's hysterical. Oh, the Tea Party, the Tea Party.
Yeah.
And Bernie gets up there and, saves $60 billion. Meanwhile, they spend $170 billion. It's like, this isn't working. You guys don't get it. The dollar is going to collapse, folks. There is going to be an incident in this country. Is it the New Madrid fault line? Is it California huge earthquake? Is it a dirty nuke going off, or the Yellowstone caldera? I have no idea. But whatever it is, it's coming. And people need to understand that they need to prepare. Don't go buy anything, and I have to sell. I don't care whether you buy my books or not. But I do care that you go buy a bunch of food. And understand that you need food and shelter and water, and you need people of a like-minded, people who are like-minded to be around you. And do that all ahead of time. So when this stuff begins to happen, you got a plan. You got a plan worked out.
Yeah, that Gaga itch, I leave the B out. She is lecturing Congress right now to pass or trying to pressure Obama into, eliminating every reference to marriage that has a definition of man and woman. She wants to have man and man, man and beast, man and sister, man and mother. She don't care. Man and dog. She's good with that. Looks like she's had a few dogs in her time. So, I mean, it's, but the people that, and here's the thing, Lynn, I've discussed this with survivalists, those that predict sort of a cataclysmic end or an anarchy catastrophe type of thing. Those that have this food supplies that you're suggesting, which is an excellent suggestion, even the U.S. government suggests that you have a 3-day supply. But if you look at Japan, I imagine a lot of people on the coast of Japan wish they had a few months supply now.
No, it's 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, well, that's what they're going to need. Yeah, that's what they're going to need. I'm hoping all those people are moving to their relatives on the good side of the island. But when society has to be rebuilt, and these Gaga followers, low-hand followers come to your door for food, screw them. Okay, because tell them to go seek Oprah's advice or whatever, what to do, because you don't want those people repopulating the earth. You don't want them repopulating nothing. Okay, these people should neuter themselves. Like this Gaga itch with the bee, they don't need to be repopulating nothing. They need to just have this where they stay outside with the roving hordes and let the reptile hordes take care of business. But don't bring them in, or you're going to repopulate them. Next thing you know, we're going to have the LNG Generate show number 2, coming back, a reprise. You're going to repopulate them. Next thing you know, we're going to have the LNG Generate show number 2, coming back, a reprise in the new America when it's rebuilt. You don't want that, do you? You don't want that thing coming back, do you?
Well, what's interesting is when all this stuff starts to come down, it's a perfect opportunity to tell people about the prophecies and about what's really going on, and start to educate people and show them from the guidebook of the supernatural what's really happening. And, even if they're, Gagaites or whoever they are, it's a perfect opportunity. And I'm not talking religion here, folks. I'm talking about supernatural warfare, which is happening in the heavenlies, which is spilling out into this dimension. That's what we're looking at, in my opinion. And, eventually, it's headed towards this one climax. The movie Paul is a thumbnail sketch of where it's all going, in my opinion. And we're being indoctrinated. We're being indoctrinated, and it's here. It's not that it's going to happen. It's happening right in front of our noses. But most people are asleep. So
you're not, Lynn. I feel like you're a resistor. Okay, are you prepared to go into that blue or red line list there? Are you on a list now?
Well, I don't know. We have not been contacted yet, which is really a good thing.
Yeah.
I speak a lot. I'm on the radio, talk about people, talk about the stuff all day long. My sphere of influence is probably not potent enough to deal with. They figure that if I'm influencing, like my blog numbers are about 5,000-6,000 a day that come to the blog.
Good.
Well, out of 300 million people in America, that's nothing. They don't care. I'm a small fish.
Okay.
If I got real big, someone like Glenn Beck or Judge Napolitano, and both of those guys are always hitting on the Federal Reserve, especially Napolitano. Napolitano pulls no punches. He tells you straight up that the Federal Reserve has nothing to do with this country. You know, I mean, he's adamant about it, livid about it. And so, you know, all hats off to the judge. I mean, he's pretty amazing in that regard. I mean, you know, I've watched Fox News and CNN and everything else, and you know, I watch a variety of different news shows, and it's really fun to watch the spin that different networks do. But obviously, in my opinion, someone got to O'Reilly because his show changed about 2 years ago, and now it's like, well, we have Culture Quiz and the Culture Warriors, and you know, Pinheads and Patriots. It's entertainment. It has nothing to do with anything, you know. And of course, he acts outraged and all this stuff. It's like, I think somebody got to him. He was creating too much of a dent, and someone will get the Beck at some point, and Napolitano at some point. These guys play hardball.
What do you think about a Ron Paul Napolitano ticket in 2012?
It'll never happen.
Hey, here's a question for you, and this is a great question because you're talking. Well, you may not be using the word. The quickening, but there are definitely acceleration's working too. But man, you're right. The Middle East is exploding. If you just did a recap, real quick, the Middle East is exploding. You got the Japan quake, you got Haiti, you've got Katrina, you've got the meltdown of the American financial system, you got the Muslimization of the world. Somebody wrote in the live chat. Then, what would you consider the last? You know, because people aren't generally going to go out and buy food tonight, and they're probably not going to tomorrow. They probably remember what you said, and go back somewhere in their brain that maybe they got to pick up an extra macaroni box and get two instead of one. But before that happens, is there something that they can point to that you see coming that is the last chance they've got to make these preparations? Is there anything that you could say?
I will say this: that if there is a full-fledged war against Israel from a combined confederacy of nations, which has been listed in the prophecy, which I've talked about on this show before, that would be the last straw.
Okay, well, somebody in the live chat.
I'm not talking a skirmish.
Did you just check the news? Somebody was saying that somebody's firing rockets into Israel today.
No, that was Hamas. Hamas fired.
Okay, well, that's their normal. That's their normal.
About 50 rockets.
Who are these Hamas guys? Can somebody please blow them up? Why do we have to even read about them?
Well, I mean, there it is, and it's the whole Palestinian thing, and that's why 1.5 million Muslims march in Tahrir Square, and they say, you know, chant in unison, "To Jerusalem we go, martyrs in the millions." That's, you know, I blog about this, Daniel. They don't care about creating a better infrastructure or creating new hospitals or jobs or education or women's rights. No. All they want to do is kill the Jews. Let's go to Jerusalem, die as martyrs for Allah, and kill as many Jews as we possibly can, and take back the Holy Land. Okay, great. Now what, guys? Let's say you accomplish all that. Now what? Now what are you going to do? You actually have to have an infrastructure. You have to actually have an education. You have to decide to make something and be productive in life. Yeah. But they don't do that. Yeah. They're not interested in that.
Well, now, Egypt was the first. Okay, they were the fire starter there. And I haven't heard anything because there's so much activity going on. These other Muslims are killing other Muslims. Of course, we're fighting Muslims in wars. They're fighting each other. You know, I mean, it's crazy. You know, maybe it's in their blood or whatever. Maybe they're all reptilians. But, you know, what is what is Egypt doing now? Are they, you know, I know they're going to have elections. The military said they'll have elections. So is that country stable now?
No, not at all. There is no stability in Egypt. I'll give you one example. Before the uprising, there was a pipeline that went from Egypt to Israel and supplied Israel with 40% of its energy. 40%, 40% of Israeli energy came from Egypt. Hamas blew up the pipeline. It has not yet been connected. When the Israelis began to talk to whoever is in charge of the Egyptians right now and asked if the pipeline would be connected, the Egyptians promptly said, no, we're not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's all changing. It's all changing. That's huge. Martyrs we go, you know, to Jerusalem we go, martyrs in the millions.
And every one of them like to be a martyr. You think, are there enough virgins in heaven for them to all be martyrs? Because I understand they get they get 70 each, so there's got to be a heck of a lot of virgins wherever the hell they're going.
A lot of virgins running around. Where do they all live?
You know, well, I think they need to rebuild the book or reread the book or get somebody to interpret it for them because, well, rebuild it would actually be a good one too. It seems to me, didn't this talk show this comedy guy who's this guy? He's like an atheist guy, but the Comedy Central guy. He just said that the Quran was an evil book. Jon Stewart. Yeah, that's who it was. Did you hear that?
No. When did he say this?
Just like a few days ago. And of course, you mentioned Fox, and so I heard a news report on Fox. They played the clip, and he said, the most hate-filled book there is the Quran. And so I think even Bill O'Reilly, although I agree with you, somebody may have got to him, because this.
Right.
These quizzes that he has popping up, and
I know, it's ridiculous.
He always have these bimbos on there, it's like, dude, okay, you just looking at them or what? Once you have, get some real news.
That's all it is. It's eye candy and entertainment.
So,
there's no news there.
But yeah, they played the clip, and he's wondering why there's no outrage for what he said. I don't know, but I just thought it's interesting to even say that. You would think because remember that cartoon where these editors,
the cartoon.
Yeah, the show, like it was American Dad or something. I mentioned this last week. There was this cartoon where the writers were going to have a Muhammad character, but they threatened to cut his head off. The writer's head. Right. So that, they went ahead and blasphemed Jesus because that's cool. You can get away with that, like this new show called I don't know if you heard about it.
Christian Bitches.
Yeah. So no, that's okay. You can have a show like that, but don't talk about Muhammad. He'll take that towel off his head and he'll whack you. He'll wet it and he'll flick it at you. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's exactly what happened in the movie Paul. I mean, Paul is a blatant frontal attack against everything we hold dear as Christians. Mm-hmm. Absolutely everything. I mean, it's borderline blasphemous on some level. And, the thing is, it's like if Christians get all in a row, now everybody will go out and see the movie. Mm-hmm. So it's, that's unfortunate. Mm-hmm. But again, it's promulgating what I call the alien gospel. Mm-hmm. And, it doesn't talk about prophecy. Christians are viewed as absolute backward Neanderthals. I mean, that's how they're portrayed.
Right.
And, I'm a Christian, and I don't think I'm a backward Neanderthal. I think I'm telling people exactly what is going on from prophecy, which is in that Christian Bible, folks. Isn't that interesting?
Well, what's going to happen is that good Christian bitches, if it ever gets out, there's going to be some preachers going to say, we're going to have a lesson, we're going to learn, and they're going to be talking about, I can just see it, they have a sermon on Sunday talking about the lesson learned from that show. I'm just saying that's what the churches today kind of remind me of, how they get their cue. That's not the thing to protest. They would actually use it to help them, to build a membership or increase the payout in the bag there. But so anyway, we were talking about your DVD called The Watchers and Lynn, how can people get that?
LAMarzulli.net, LAMarzulli.net. You can see the trailer for Watchers 1. And also we're taking pre-orders for Watchers 2, which is called Signs in the Heavens. Mm-hmm. Watchers 1 is UFOs are real versioning, not going away. We don't tell you what we think they are. We don't pontificate. We just show you the evidence. And it's great to sit down. And the reason why we went to film is because, writing books is great, but it's only one person at a time. You show someone a DVD, 50 people can sit in the room and watch the thing. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you get dialogue and people are talking about it. And this is episodic. Mm-hmm. We're working on 2. Number 3 is on the board. And Watchers 2 should probably be out sometime in April, early May at the latest. Mm-hmm. And you can watch trailers for both of them by going to LAMarzulli.net, LAMarzulli.net. And we're selling them like hotcakes, and it's making a difference.
By the way, I want to ask you something about that movie. You interviewed, is it Stephen Greer?
No, Dr. Roger Lear.
Roger Lear, yeah. Now, is he the guy taking out the alien implants?
Yes, he is.
Did you see those implants yourself?
Yes, I held them in my hand.
And how is it that they track people with something that looks like just a piece of metal?
Well, first of all, these are not tracking devices. Mm-hmm. Lear and I both concur on that. These devices are changing the person's DNA, is what they're doing. They are prototypes to change a person's DNA. They can track them. Each person's DNA on this planet gives off a different frequency. Mm-hmm. And if you built a receiver, in other words, if you knew the person's DNA frequency, you could track them anywhere on the planet.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so once they have the information, what can be done against a person if they have that information?
Well, are you talking about someone who's got an implant, what can happen to them?
Right. What's going on with it? Are they just seeing how they live?
Well, Lear thinks, and I think, I'll drop a bombshell on your show here. I've gone public with this, and it has to do with prophecy and stuff. And this is, I guarantee your people have not heard what I'm going to say in about 2 minutes. But here's the bottom deal: we believe at the that these implants are changing the DNA. They are not tracking devices. They are literally changing the DNA. So we've got 4 different prophecies, right? And a lot of prophecy, people never think to overlay the prophecies. In other words, could it be that 2 or 3 different prophecies given that are seemingly unrelated and given by different prophets over a couple hundred years, so there's no collusion between them? Could it be that they're talking about the same event from a different perspective? An example of this would be Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53, talking about the crucifixion in graphic detail, happening hundreds of years later in some cases, thousands of years later in other cases, from when these prophecies were first penned, talking about Yeshua, Jesus' blood sacrifice on Calvary. Psalm 22, Isaiah 53. Overlay them, same event. 2 different prophets looking at the same event. With that in mind, in the guidebook of the supernatural, we are told it'll be like the days of Noah when the Son of Man returns. Okay, what differentiates the days of Noah is the presence of the Nephilim, the fallen angels, which we sort of touched on.
Right.
But another aspect of the days of Noah is longevity. People live 5, 6, 7, 900 years old. Okay, that's the first thing. Then we go to the book of Revelation, and we find out, this one you all know, that people will not be able to buy, sell, or trade unless they take some sort of a mark on the hand or the forehead. Okay, that's interesting. Then we find out a little later that anyone who takes the mark is immediately judged. There's no repentance. There's no second chance. You take the mark, that's it. You're done with. That's it. It's over. So once you take the mark, you're host. Okay. And the fourth thing we see is that men and women will seek death and not find it during the time of the tribulation. Will seek death and not find it. What are we looking at here? Okay. Now you take the Roger Lear interview with the implants, changing the DNA. That becomes the mark. This thing is about the size of a grain of rice, actually smaller in some cases. It goes underneath the skin. It changes the DNA. So in other words, this is actually smaller in some cases. It goes underneath the skin. It changes the DNA. So in other words, this is all speculation, but this is where I think it might be going. And all these prophecies I just mentioned are all fulfilled in this little chip from ET when they show up after some sort of cataclysmic war in the Middle East, and they will do 2 things. They will offer us gifts. The first gift will be a free energy source that will replace the oil. Free energy, like cold fusion, okay? Amazing. Some sort of anti-graviton type device that which renders cars and everything else completely obsolete, right? Okay. The second thing that they will give us will be a chip, which will extend our lifespan to 500 years disease-free. Really? People would line up around the block for that. And that's what I think the mark of the beast is.
Really? Awesome. That is a bombshell.
Changes the DNA, expands the life, and you won't be able to die. You won't be able to.
Now, who's going to argue with that? Some Neanderthal in a church somewhere? Somebody who's not watching Good Christian Bitches?
There you go.
So, those quacks won't take it, okay? Neither will old grandma. Grandma don't like it either. No, so maybe the Obama healthcare go ahead and euthanize her. You know what I'm saying? One of the death squads, what do they call the death
yeah, exactly.
Death panel, yes.
Death panels. I think we should live. How many people?
Yeah,
No thanks. Sounds like Nazis to me.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to talk about real quickly on your DVD, you talk about the bird deaths. What do you ascribe that to?
Well, we don't know. There's all sorts of theories with that. Methane gas, HARP, being used, but it's global. Yeah. Whatever's causing it, it's global. In other words, it's just not along the New Madrid fault line. I mean, the fish deaths were in the millions this year. I mean, literally. Yeah. In rivers of Bolivia, they were so cold that all this millions of marine life died. We out here in Southern California, millions of sardines wash up at Redondo Beach. I mean, it ain't going away, is it? You see, I've never seen anything like this, ever. And that's the thing. When you start, if it's just one incident, I don't say a word. But we start stockpiling or start building the case brick by brick, which is what we talked about tonight, look at the Middle East imploding. Look at the volcanic activity, the earthquakes of 7.2 on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
The fires in Russia, 500 fires. The floods
animal
in
die-offs, right?
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
the floods in Australia, the earthquakes
mm-hmm.
in Christchurch, the Chilean earthquake, the Haitian earthquake, the Eyjafjallajoki volcano blowing, the sun coming up 2 days later or earlier rather in Greenland, the magnetic shifting of the magnetic pole shifting 40 miles from where it was, the Earth being blown off its axis last week by the 9.1 Japanese earthquake by 3 or 4 inches, and on and on and on it goes. It ain't business as usual, folks. These are the birth pangs. Wake up. Study prophecy. Understand the times we're living in.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, we're getting near the end here, Lynn. Is there anything else you want to talk about or mention before we call it a night? It's been power-packed and insightful, block-busting interview once again with you.
Well, I certainly appreciate you having me on, Daniel. And all I can say is, we're in very tenuous, tumultuous times. I blog 6 days a week. Obviously, with the emergency stuff that's going on now in Libya, I'll probably talk about that tomorrow. But it's